All right, how you doing, Vox? Yep, yep. All right, let me try again. How you doing, Vox? All right, good. Hey, I was listening. I was listening to this pastor in Delray, Florida. He was telling his story, and when he grew up not a Christian at all. He said, I would have probably told people I was a Christian, and by that I meant like I wasn't Buddhist or Muslim. And that was like, he's like, that's how religious I was. He said, grew up, kind of did that thing. He said when he went to college, kind of fell into the college party scene. He went to a big university in Virginia. And he said, all I did was party. One night, though, his friend came over to their dorm. They were having a big party that night. He said, friend got to the door, and I had a whole bag of weed for him. He said, I gave it to him and said, hey, man, this is for you for the weekend. I got a girl here who you get to spend the weekend with. Like, it's going to be a good weekend. Like, we're going to have a good time. And his friend said, hey, man, thanks for thinking of me, but I'm not going to do any of that. He said, I'm a Christian now, and I think God sent me here to tell you to become a Christian. And he said, I thought my friend was absolutely crazy. Like, this was the most insane thing I ever heard. He's like, all right, I'll keep the weed. That's mine now. And so he said his friend left the party and he did what he was going to do. And he said for weeks, his friend kept trying to push Jesus and have this conversation with him. And all he had was doubt questions. He would write back and be like, I don't think so. What about this? What about this? What about this? And his friend would try to answer, but his friend was kind of new to Jesus, so didn't really know how to answer. So it went on kind of like this for months. And then there was a night that he was partying. He was in his dorm room. He said he was as high as he could have been, and he saw a Bible under his bed, and something hit him, and he went, I need to pick this up. And so he goes and he grabs the Bible from under his bed, and he plays Bible roulette, which you've played. He just opened the Bible to a random spot and was like, hopefully God's speaking to me. If God, you're real, you're going to speak to me in the random page, which is so dangerous. But here's what happened. He opened the Bible, and it was Ezekiel 18, verse 20. Righteous people will be rewarded for their own righteous behavior. Wicked people will be punished for their own wickedness. But if wicked people turn away from their sins and begin to obey me and do what is just and right, they'll surely live. All their past sins will be forgotten, and they will live because of the righteous things they've done. And he said he just started to cry. And that night, something changed in his life, and it wasn't immediate. He said the reality was, he said, I was interested in God from that moment on. He said, I felt like God was speaking to me and that there was something that needed to change. He said, so here's what I would do. He said, I'd go to my dorm room, I'd shut the door, I'd pull out a Bible and a highlighter. He said I had black lights, so I'd turn my black lights on. And then he said I would smoke a ton of weed and read the Bible high. And he said, I forgot everything I read. He said, I'd read it and remember absolutely nothing. He said, that was my spiritual relationship with God for months. Was like me opening the Bible so high, just like amazed by the highlighter glowing in the dark, On spring break, he went to Panama City, Florida, from Virginia. He went to party in Florida, and while he was in a restaurant, these guys from a Christian club walked up to him, and the guy, I think his name was David, he said, David walked up to the table and said, "Hey, I recognize you from Virginia Tech, right?" He's like, "Yeah." He's like, "Well, hey, we're on a missions trip from our campus in Virginia. I saw you and recognized you. I want to talk to you about Jesus." And so from across multiple states, this guy sits down, has a conversation about Jesus, and begins to share some things. And then he said, "Hey, when we get back to Virginia, what do you say you and I meet up every week? We'll grab a bite at Taco Bell. You and I will sit and we'll talk about Jesus." And he said as soon as he got back, this guy named David began to meet with him every week and begin to point out some things, like maybe reading the Bible high is not the best move, right? And he said, I ended up quitting drugs. He said, I was doing a ton of drugs, and I just ended up quitting drugs. And David began to talk me through. He said, I couldn't, I wasn't sleeping around anymore because I recognized some things. He said, and things started to change in my life, and I had this guy walking with me. He said, and every time I made mistakes, David would remind me that Jesus was big enough to forgive my mistakes, and he'd help me through it. Years later, this guy ends up, his name is Garrett. Now he's a pastor. And I love this because how do you go from like pothead college partier to someone who's leading people in holiness weekly? And the answer is that someone walked with him in the way of Jesus, and it changed everything. Now, we have a Bible word for that. We call that discipleship because that's the word that Jesus used. When Jesus was around, there was a word that it's actually, my Greek is not good, but I think it's mathetes, which really spelled out looks like mathletes, but it's not mathletes. It was like a word that kind of meant a student. And so basically in Jesus' day, it was kind of a normal thing where there would be somebody who's like a teacher or a wise person or a sage or something like this, and you would follow what they said and you would follow what they did. And that's literally why we've borrowed the phrase for social media, and we say you have followers, right? Like that idea comes from this 2,000-year-old concept. Like that's literally, you follow somebody to do this. But in Jesus' time, there was kind of all different teachers, and there was all different things, and you could be a student of or a disciple of this person. And what ultimately was the hope was that as you followed them, you would begin to talk like they talk, to do things the way that they do. You would begin to become like them. And listen, this isn't like really an abstract principle, because I promise that at one point in your life, you had a teacher, a coach, a parent, an adult, an annoying older sibling who said something along the lines of, "Show me your friends and I'll show you your future," right? You've heard something like that. I just think of an older sibling sitting you down and being like, "Your friends suck," right? So anyway, but it's true. We become like what we surround ourselves with. You might not remember yourself in middle school really well. You might have like blocked that out of your mind. But I promise you, there was ways that you dressed in middle school that was purely a reflection of who you were following, right? You dressed like who you were following. You talked like who you were following. That's why it's always crazy when little kids get exposed to like really bad stuff, because then they immediately repeat it. You know what I'm talking about? And you have little kids saying words that they should never say, and you're like, oh my God. So it's because we tend to imitate what we follow. And Jesus had disciples that followed him and did what he did. They talked like he talked. They walked like he walked. They learned from him how to live. And then we are invited to do the same thing. So if tonight's your first night, I'm really glad you're here. Or if you've missed some of the other weeks of the series, let me catch you up real quick. We're in a series called In Real Life, and we're talking about like how is it that being a Christian affects our real life? It's got to be more than just what you do on a Wednesday night. It has to be more. It actually has to affect the way that you live. And so we've talked about how the way we live as Christians in the world is generous, and it's welcoming, and it's hospitable, and it's serving, and it's all of these things. But one of this is the last thing that we're going to talk about in this series. The last kind of thing that Christians do in real life. And it comes from Matthew 28. While you go there, let me unpack that Jesus had disciples. You've heard me say that. He had 12 that like literally followed him. They like lived with him. They went places with him. They like quit their jobs and followed Jesus. He had 3 guys that were in that circle that he spent the most time with, just hanging out with. He would pull them on special things and chat with them. He also had a group of like 72 people that were trying to live everything that he was saying. They were following what he was doing. They like served in Jesus's ministry. And then he had a lot of people who just kind of would show up whenever Jesus was in town. And so, but Jesus in Matthew 28 is talking to a large group of people who have been following, and it says this: Jesus came and told his disciples, "I've been given all authority in heaven and on earth." So real quick, this is Matthew 28, the last chapter in the book of Matthew. So this is the end of Matthew's biography of Jesus. And when he ends his book, this is post-death. Okay, so Jesus was killed. 3 days later, he came back to life. This conversation is literally happening with hundreds of witnesses. So like people who knew he was dead, they're seeing Jesus, hundreds of people seeing Jesus alive. This is trippy, okay, right? They're going, wait, you are definitely dead. And Jesus is standing there alive, preaching to them. And then he says the most boss thing of all time. He says, "I've been given all authority in heaven and earth." He literally says, "I won." Like, he goes, guys, I did it. I am the champion. That's literally what he's saying. He's like, guys, I have every victory. Like, this is it. Come on, man. This is it. He's going, I have won. So then he says, therefore go and make disciples of everyone. Why does he say, therefore go? Jesus goes, hey, guess what? I won. Like I did the whole thing. Life now is completely different. Therefore, go and make disciples of all nations. Baptize them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. He continues, he says, and teach these new disciples to obey all the commands I've given you. And be sure of this, I'm with you always, even to the end of the age. And I just love this thing. He starts and he goes, guys, guess what? I defeated death. I defeated the enemy. I defeated sin. I won. Now, we need to tell everyone we can about this. Tell everybody, every nation, all over the world, show them the right way to live. Like, Jesus is going, because we did it. Like, we proved, Jesus goes, we proved it. We won. This is it. Go, tell people, make them disciples and teach them to obey everything. And Jesus goes, and I'm never going to leave you. It's beautiful. So, every Christian is given this mission. It's a shared mission. It's a co-mission. This is literally why we call this chapter, this little section, we call it the Great Co-Mission. Do you know why? Because we're all on that mission together. And it's pretty great because it's literally a purpose statement for all of us. That all of us are making disciples. Now, I had a family member years ago who, not a follower of Jesus, really hates that idea. And the way he reframed it back to me was, I can't believe that it's important to you to push your religion on other people. That's not the goal. That's not the mindset. The mindset is that Jesus won everything. And you can either be on his winning side or not on his side. And I want everybody to be on the winning side. And so I'm going to tell everybody I can about this because this way is better. The Bible says that sin leads to death. And I don't want death for anyone. I want life. So I'm going to walk with you in the way of life so that you find Jesus and can live. That's why we do this. Sometimes we miss this idea. Jesus says, make disciples, and we go, okay, I'll learn things. But being a disciple of Jesus and making disciples of Jesus is explained in that very next verse where it says, teach them to obey everything I've commanded. See, following Jesus isn't learning and memorizing so many things. Following Jesus is doing what Jesus did. It's becoming like him. It's being transformed to become like this. The theologian Dallas Willard once said, the greatest issue facing the world today, with all its heartbreaking needs, is whether those who by profession or culture are identified as Christian will become disciples. Students, apprentices, practitioners of Jesus Christ, steadily learning from him how to live the life of the kingdom of heaven into every corner of human existence. He felt like the greatest tragedy that the world faced was that Christians wouldn't live what they said they believed and transform people to believe and do what they're supposed to say or what they're supposed to believe and do. Because if Christians would do what we believe we're supposed to do, the entire world would be different. But here's the deal. There's a breakdown because often we know what to do and we still don't do it. Often we know what's right, we still don't do it, either because we can't or we won't or we're overwhelmed by it, whatever it is. We miss targets all the time. It's already the end of January. Some of you kicked off 2025 and you were like, I'm reading my Bible every day. Day 3, you were like, let's figure something else out, right? So, like, here's the deal. We miss targets sometimes. The problem is we think that it's if I just got more information, and we need transformation. And let me explain something, that transformation happens sometimes by being spoken into, and sometimes it happens when you're trying to help other people. Have you ever given your friends better advice than you can take yourself? Yeah, you have. Some of you are the wisest people you know and live the dumbest way possible. Like somebody asks, like, hey, what do I do about this girl? And you're like, listen, fact 1, fact 2, fact 3, wise quote, here's what you need to do, Bible verse, get it, change your life, you're better. And you're doing the same exact thing. Yeah. We hit on a passion point. Okay, but here's the deal. Jesus didn't just come and teach. Jesus came and he started a process where he took 12 people and said, let me change your life. Now, I want you to go and change other people's lives. And they did. And then the people who were changed in the first century in Rome changed other people's lives. And then those people changed the lives of believers all the way into the second and the third and the fourth till the 21st century. And we're still recipients, not just of a teaching, but of a way, like a process. Like people who did this. When I was younger, I had Christian leaders who would sit me down and have hard conversations with me. Some of them would teach me things. Some of them would encourage and push me on and charge me up. And I had people who discipled me, who poured in to me. When I was in high school, I had one idea of discipleship. In my mind, when I was in high school, discipleship meant I had to cram everything I knew about Jesus in as few conversations as possible. And so, Johnny, where you at? Johnny, I want to use you. Come here real quick. Y'all make some noise for Johnny. He had no choice. He has no choice. Okay. But literally, yeah, you come right up here. Johnny, you're perfect because, one, you're way taller than me. 2, your name is Johnny, and that's going to be important. And 3, you've got a good amount of hair going on. Okay. All right. So when I was in high school, I had a friend named Johnny who was way taller than me, who had really long hair. And one week, he reached out and he was like, hey, Josh, I have a question, what is the Bible about? So ask me.
What's the Bible about?
Great question, Johnny. Here's what I want you to do. Tuesday after school, come over to my house. I'll tell you what the Bible's about. And I spent hours preparing like an 8-page paper. And Johnny and I we'll sit, come on. We sat in my bedroom and literally for 2 hours, I monologued. I was like, let me tell you, so the Bible is this. And literally, as we talked, as we sat there, Johnny's eyes started to glaze. You ever see something, you're like, they can't hear any more words you're saying. I'm confident 10 minutes in, we had already hit his threshold. And I went for another hour and 50 minutes just talking. And I was like, all right, man, you let me know when you want to do this again. We never met again. Y'all give it up for Johnny. The good news is that someone else told Johnny about Jesus. He goes to church in Cape Coral now. He's doing great. It wasn't me. And so I thought that's what discipleship was. I actually, though, had a friend who every day I would drive him home from school. And when I would drive him home, we would get to his house. We would play Star Wars Battlefront. We'd eat an entire sleeve of Fig Newtons. It was a different time, you know? And then we would talk about what we read in the Bible that day. And every day I spent maybe an hour just hanging with him. And over the years, he became more like me as I tried to become more like Jesus. And I wouldn't have called that discipleship. I would have called that taking somebody home from school and playing video games. But in hindsight, God was using that to change his life. And I want to explain something. I was praying about this message, and then I fell asleep last night, and there was this image in my head, 3, 2, 1, and I don't know, but here's what's in my head. That we kind of fit in this triangle. Y'all know triangle is a really strong shape, right? Yeah, really strong shape. That's why bridges are made out of triangles and stuff like that. I think that each of us needs somebody that we're following. And listen, I get it. All of you, if you're a Christian, you're following Jesus. You're like, I'm following Jesus. That's awesome. But do you remember what Jesus posted on TikTok? Oh, no, you don't, because Jesus isn't on TikTok. So you actually might need a Christian who is alive, who understands TikTok, who's a little further in faith than you, to go, hey, what are you posting on TikTok? Like, how are you using that? I know you're following Jesus, but you also need somebody that you are following, who's following Jesus. And that's actually something the Bible had Paul write, follow me as I follow Christ. That's the model. There's people that you go, okay, I need to see what you're doing. I need to do this. I love that some of you reach out and ask the most amazing questions. And you're like, what do you do? How do you do this? How do you do this? This is amazing. So we need somebody that we are following. I think at the same moment, you need some people who are walking with you, who are in your world, in your corner, who are walking toward Jesus. You're very familiar, Proverbs 27, as verse 17, as iron sharpens iron, so a friend sharpens a friend. You need some people who are sharpening you, but just 2 verses later it says this, just like a face is reflected in water, so the heart reflects the real person. And I just think sometimes you might be going, well, I don't know if this person is a good influence on me. Yeah, you do. Look at their heart. Yeah, you do. Because the same way you can look at a mirror and see a face, you can look at somebody's heart and you can see who they are. And if you look at their heart and you're like, that is not, then they're not in the place of building you up. Right? And you need some people to build you up. So here's the deal. If you look around and all of your friends Everybody you hang out with, everybody you spend time with, nobody is calling you up, nobody is walking with you. You need to add some things to your life. But then here's the third part, is that as a follower of Jesus, I have a mission to walk with somebody, to invite them to see Jesus and see his way and go this way. And here's the deal. You can start discipleship with somebody who's not even a Christian yet. Like they don't have to be a Christian to begin to watch how you live, to begin to see what you do. You might have some friends who are just like spiritually interested. And you're like, all right, hey, check this out. And bit by bit, you're moving them in this way. What would it look like if all of us were learning from those above us, encouraging those beside us, and leading those coming after us? So, I told you my promise at the beginning of this series that this year I want to push us to live beyond a Wednesday night experience, to push us beyond just a Sunday morning gathering, but to push us to living the way of Jesus in real life. And if there's one impact that I want to see so big, so greatly, it's that we would follow Jesus and lead others to follow Jesus.